While my fiancée was in the shower, her phone buzzed 7 times. I picked up and he whispered, "I missed last night." I never meant to be the guy who snoops through his partner's phone. I used to think people who did that were paranoid, insecure, or just waiting to destroy their own relationships. But sometimes a choice isn't really a choice. It was one of those nights when the universe puts the evidence in your hands and dares you to ignore it. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of running water. My fiancée, Camille, was in the shower, steam rolling under the bathroom door. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through headlines, barely paying attention, when her phone started buzzing against the coffee table. Once, twice, then a third time. Same number, no name attached. By the 5th buzz, my pulse had already quickened. By the 7th, something inside me snapped. It wasn't rational. It wasn't even curiosity. It was instinct, the kind of primal pull you can't resist. I reached for her phone, thumb hovering, hesitating like I was about to cut a live wire. Then I slid it across and answered. For a split second, there was silence. Then a man's voice, low, intimate, confident. "I missed last night." I froze. My throat went dry. He said it the way a person speaks when they're sure the right person is listening. No hesitation, no testing the waters. Just pure certainty. I didn't hang up. I didn't speak. I let the silence hang between us. After a pause, he added, "Don't tell me you're pretending you didn't like it." His chuckle was casual, warm. My grip tightened on the phone until I thought it would snap in half. The bathroom door creaked behind me. Steam drifted out, and Camille's voice called lightly, "Babe, who's that?" I didn't answer. I stood, stormed across the living room, and yanked the bathroom door open. She jumped, slipping slightly on the wet tiles, hair slicked to her shoulders. Her eyes darted to the phone in my hand, then to my face. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I just extended my arm and shoved the phone toward her. The line was still open. The man's voice came again, clear as a blade slicing through the steam. "Camille, you still there?" Her knees nearly buckled. She fumbled for the phone with wet hands, her face twisting between terror and rage. "Nathaniel, give me that." But I already hit the speaker button. The bathroom filled with his voice. "Baby, you done showering?" Her scream wasn't at me, it was at him. She jabbed the button and killed the call, then stood there dripping water, chest heaving, eyes wide like a cornered animal. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice lower than I'd ever heard it. She stammered, It's a joke. Someone from work. They play around like that. It doesn't mean anything." "Work?" I stepped closer, steam clinging to my skin, the phone burning hot in my hand. "Who calls 7 times in 10 minutes with 'I missed last night' as a joke? Who laughs like that? Who calls you baby?" Her lips trembled. She looked away, then back, then tried to regain control. "Nathaniel, please. It's not what you think." Neighbors started pounding on the wall from the other side, muffled voices shouting for quiet. But I couldn't stop. The apartment wasn't just 4 walls anymore. It was a courtroom, and I wasn't leaving until the truth was dragged out and bleeding. So I did the only thing that would corner her. I redialed the number. Hit speaker. Ring. Ring. Then his voice, casual as ever. "You back already? Can't wait another hour, huh?" The look on Camille's face told me everything words couldn't. She dropped her towel, scrambled for clothes, muttering half-coherent denials, but her body language betrayed her. She was guilty. She wasn't scared of losing me. She was terrified of losing control of the lie. I followed her into the bedroom. "Who is he?" She pulled on a shirt inside out, her hands shaking. He's just a guy from the office. Stefan, it's nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He called you 7 times while you were in the shower. He says he misses last night. That's not a fling. That's not nothing." Her voice cracked. "Please, don't blow this up. We can fix it." But she had underestimated me. Maybe she thought I'd storm out, slam the door, disappear so she could spin this later as a misunderstanding. But I wasn't giving her that chance. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, and told her flatly, "Call him. Now. Put him on speaker. Tell him I'm here." Her face drained of color. "Nathaniel, do it." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, with trembling fingers, she hit his number. The line clicked, and his voice came through, smooth, oblivious. "Did you lose signal? Don't worry, I'm still thinking about you." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She just stared at me, pleading silently. That was the final nail. She couldn't even bring herself to lie out loud. I grabbed the phone. "She's not alone. She's with her fiancé. You want to repeat what you just said?" There was dead air. Then a sharp inhale. "Who the hell is this?" "Her fiancé," I said coldly. "The man paying her rent. The one she promised a wedding to. The one she was supposed to be loyal to while she was busy sneaking around with you." He cursed under his breath, then tried to switch gears. "Look, man, you've got it wrong. She told me she was single. I barked a bitter laugh. You're calling her baby on repeat and telling her you missed last night, but you didn't think to check if she had someone at home? Either you're lying, or you're just as pathetic as she is. That's when the line went dead. He hung up. Camille collapsed onto the bed, hands in her hair, sobbing into her palms. But I wasn't moved. Something inside me had hardened. I realized I wasn't watching my fiancée cry. I was watching a performance. The tears weren't for me. They were for her, for the world she was afraid of losing now that the mask had slipped. And I decided then, I wasn't walking out quietly. I stood, pocketed her phone, and said, "Get dressed. We're going to him." Her head snapped up. "What? You heard me. We're going to his place. Tonight. If you've got nothing to hide, prove it. Otherwise, I'll knock on his door myself and let his wife answer it." The silence after that was deafening. She stared at me, frozen. Then, realizing I wasn't bluffing, she scrambled to throw on jeans and shoes, still muttering excuses, still begging for me to wait. But I was already out the door, keys in hand. That night didn't just fracture something between us. It set the stage for an explosion that would drag more than just me and Camille into the fire. But in that moment, all I knew was that we were driving straight toward the man who thought he could whisper into my life and walk away untouched. The silence in the car was worse than any argument we could have had. Camille sat rigid in the passenger seat, arms crossed tightly, her wet hair leaving streaks of water on her shirt. Every streetlight cut across her face like a spotlight, exposing every twitch and flinch. She tried to speak several times, but each attempt dissolved into muttered fragments that died in her throat. I drove with a calmness that didn't belong to me. It wasn't rage anymore, not even heartbreak. It was something sharper, colder, the clarity of someone who had already stepped beyond the point of no return. I had no plan beyond arriving at Stefan's door, but I didn't need one. The truth would write itself when they stood side by side. Camille fidgeted with her hands, whispering excuses that sounded rehearsed. She tried to convince me that I was overreacting, that Stefan had misled her, that it was some temporary mistake she regretted. The words slid past me like water. What she didn't realize was that her explanations weren't competing with my logic. They were competing with the memory of his voice whispering about last night. That whisper had already won. By the time we reached the quiet neighborhood of townhouses, my pulse was steady, but my jaw ached from being clenched too long. Camille muttered directions in a defeated tone, guiding me to the unit tucked in the corner of the cul-de-sac. Warm lights glowed behind the blinds, and a car was parked neatly in the driveway. I killed the engine and stepped out without hesitation. Camille's protests grew frantic as she trailed behind me up the walkway, her voice breaking into sharp pleas. But there was no going back. I rang the doorbell. It didn't take long. The door opened, and Stefan stood there, framed by the glow of his living room. He wasn't the man I had imagined. He wasn't rugged or slick. He was ordinary, maybe even soft around the edges, but his expression gave him away, the sudden tightening around his mouth, the stiffening of his shoulders, the quick dart of his eyes toward Camille. He knew exactly what this was. For a moment, no one spoke. It was the kind of silence that stretched like wire, thin and sharp enough to cut. Camille shifted behind me, trying to shrink into the shadows, but I wouldn't let her hide. I stepped forward, forcing Stefan to meet my gaze. He opened his mouth, searching for words, and what finally came out was weak, defensive. He tried to downplay it, framing it as if Camille had simply given him the wrong impression. But his body betrayed him. The way he kept glancing at her, the way his hand gripped the doorframe so tightly his knuckles blanched. I didn't shout, didn't lunge. I stood there and let him twist. The weight of his lies pressed harder with every second, and the facade began to crack. Camille finally broke into sobs, half pleading with him to say something, anything that might shield her from the storm. But instead of protecting her, Stefan stumbled into self-preservation. He tried to pivot the blame onto her, painting himself as the victim of her seduction. That was the moment I realized how deeply she had sunk herself into this. She wasn't just betraying me. She had entwined herself with a man who would sell her out the instant the walls closed in. The confrontation had already burned hot, but what happened next made it volcanic. From deeper in the house came the sound of footsteps, light but deliberate. A woman's voice carried from the hallway, asking who was at the door. Stefan's face drained of color. The figure that appeared behind him was unmistakably his wife. Her eyes flicked from Stefan to me to Camille, and the expression that spread across her face wasn't confusion. It was recognition, the dawning awareness of a suspicion finally confirmed. She didn't need explanations. The truth was written across the scene in front of her. Her voice sharpened like glass breaking as she demanded answers. Stefan tried to stammer something out, reaching for her arm, but she wrenched away with such force that he nearly lost his balance. She turned her fury on Camille, unleashing a barrage of words that left her trembling and speechless. It was chaos contained only by the four walls around us. The wife's voice rose to a pitch that made neighbors' blinds twitch, lights flick on, shadows gather at windows. Stefan's attempts to calm her only fueled her rage, and Camille's sobbing only made it worse. In the midst of the eruption, I stood motionless, observing. It was almost surgical, watching the life they had built collapse in real time. The confrontation wasn't just mine anymore. It had spilled over, infecting their marriage, their home, their neighbor's quiet evening. The wife demanded proof, and I handed her Camille's phone without hesitation. She scrolled through the call log, the repeated number, the timestamps that matched Camille's so-called late nights at work. Her hands trembled, but her resolve solidified. She didn't scream at Stefan anymore. She announced, loud enough for the entire street to hear, that she would ruin him for this. Stefan's calm facade disintegrated. He begged, pleaded, shifted blame from Camille back to himself, then back again, as if flinging accusations in every direction might dilute the truth. But it was too late. His wife had seen enough. She stormed into the house, her voice echoing down the hallway as she gathered evidence of her own. Drawers slammed, doors banged open, her rage spilling into every corner of their domestic space. Camille clung to my arm, her voice ragged, begging me to leave before things got worse. But I stayed. I wanted her to feel the weight of the fallout she had set in motion. Every sob, every desperate glance, every trembling excuse was a performance collapsing under the pressure of reality. The neighbors had begun to gather on porches, whispering to one another. Some even pulled out phones, capturing fragments of the scene. Stefan's perfect suburban facade was burning down in front of them. Finally, the wife returned, arms full of papers and photos, shoving them into Stefan's chest. She ordered him to get out, her voice low but lethal. Stefan looked at Camille one last time, as if hoping for solidarity, but she had nothing left to give him. She was drowning in her own fear, her own humiliation. I turned to leave then, not because I was satisfied, but because the confrontation had detonated exactly as I had known it would. The truth was no longer a secret whispered over a phone. It was public, undeniable, irreversible. The drive home was different. Camille sat in silence, staring out the window, her face pale and swollen from crying. The facade of control she had tried so hard to maintain was shattered. She knew that what had happened at that doorstep was only the beginning. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. She could feel the distance between us stretching wider with every passing mile. The confrontation had torn open more than just her betrayal. It had exposed her weakness, her poor choices, and the fragility of everything she thought she could keep hidden. By the time we reached the apartment, Camille's phone was still buzzing. Not with Stefan this time, but with messages from friends, colleagues, numbers I didn't recognize. The scandal was spreading faster than either of us had anticipated. That night, I realized the story wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about how one careless lie could ripple outward, pulling down entire lives in its undertow. And Camille, still clinging to excuses, still hoping for some way to spin it, hadn't yet understood that the most destructive part was still to come. The apartment felt smaller than ever when we returned. Camille dropped her bag on the floor and collapsed onto the couch, head in her hands, sobbing into the fabric like it could hide her shame. But it wasn't shame for what she had done. It was the humiliation of being caught, the fear of what was coming next. I paced the room, unable to sit. My phone buzzed with notifications as neighbors and mutual acquaintances started whispering. It hadn't even been an hour, and already the confrontation at Stefan's house was leaking into the open. Word travels faster than truth when it has scandal on its side. Camille's sobbing shifted to anger. She accused me of escalating the situation, of humiliating her by dragging her to Stefan's door, of making things public when it could have been fixed quietly. I let her rant, every word digging her deeper. She wasn't mourning us. She was furious that her double life had collapsed in a single night. By morning, the fallout was unavoidable. Camille's phone lit up with a stream of messages, co-workers, friends, even her family. The story had splintered into fragments. Some thought Stefan had been chasing her. Others believed she had been chasing him. But the core truth was inescapable. She wasn't the woman people thought she was. She tried to regain control. She spun the narrative, painting me as unstable, claiming I had overreacted, that Stefan had misunderstood her friendliness. She whispered poison into ears, framing herself as a victim of a jealous fiancé. She didn't realize how transparent it sounded. People may enjoy gossip, but they recognize desperation when they hear it. The real explosion came when Stefan's wife made her move. She wasn't quiet, wasn't hesitant. She went directly to his workplace with proof, screenshots of calls, messages, and my testimony if she needed it. She marched into his office, dropped the evidence on the desk, and walked out. By lunchtime, Stefan was suspended pending investigation. His co-workers whispered in hallways. HR scrambled to contain the damage, and Camille's name became tied to scandal in professional circles she couldn't escape. Camille lashed out at me then, her voice shaking with venom. She claimed I had orchestrated everything to destroy her, that I had wanted to humiliate her in public. She screamed that I had ruined her life. I didn't respond. The truth was louder than any defense I could give. But beneath her rage, there was panic. She started hiding her phone whenever it buzzed, retreating into corners to send frantic messages. Her lies weren't just about Stefan anymore. There were gaps she couldn't cover, cracks that widened the more she tried to patch them. One evening, while she was in the shower again, I saw the proof. Her phone lit up with a message preview she hadn't silenced. Miss you already. Same place next week. The name wasn't Stefan. It was someone I had never seen before. I didn't need to dig far. The thread of messages was a timeline of another affair, one that stretched back months, overlapping with Stefan and weaving through weekends she claimed to be visiting family. The man was someone from her past, an old acquaintance she had reconnected with. She hadn't just stumbled into one betrayal. She had been running parallel lives, stacking lies on lies like a house of cards. The revelation didn't bring shock this time. It brought clarity. Camille wasn't someone who had slipped once. She was someone who lived in betrayal, who fed on it, who needed the thrill of deception like oxygen. Stefan wasn't her only secret. He was just the one who had been sloppy enough to expose her. When she emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I watched her dry her hair, humming nervously, pretending life could return to normal. She didn't know that I had already stepped beyond the point of reconciliation. She didn't realize I had seen the entire scope of her duplicity. The scandal outside grew hotter. Stefan's wife, armed with her fury, began reaching out to people Camille knew. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be caught in the firestorm. Camille's co-workers whispered in hushed tones when she walked into meetings. She became the subject of side glances and awkward silences. Instead of humility, she doubled down. She told anyone who would listen that I had fabricated evidence, that Stefan's wife had twisted the truth, that I was jealous and controlling. She crafted herself into a victim in a story where she was the architect of every disaster. I didn't stop her. I let her dig her hole, because the deeper she went, the more satisfying it would be when the collapse finally came. Stefan tried to salvage his marriage, but the wife had drawn her line. She filed papers within the week, moving out with their children, leaving him alone in the townhouse where our confrontation had detonated. His career unraveled as HR investigations peeled back layers of impropriety. His name carried shame in every hallway. Camille saw this and panicked. She begged me to stand by her, to defend her, to protect her from the tidal wave. She promised that if I forgave her, we could rebuild, that she would cut ties, that none of it had to mean the end. But I had seen the second affair in her phone. I knew forgiveness was nothing but another stage for her to perform on. Instead of confrontation, I played a quieter game. I began documenting everything, the calls, the messages, the contradictions. I spoke with Stefan's wife, aligning our timelines, trading proof. What had begun as a single act of betrayal was morphing into a full case file, every page stamped with Camille's lies. The turning point came at a family dinner she insisted on attending. She thought she could still control the narrative there, that she could lean on familiar faces to shield her. She rehearsed her lines, practicing the role of victim, convinced she could win sympathy. But by then, her credibility was shredded. Relatives who had heard whispers gave her cold, measured looks. Conversations faltered when she entered the room. She raised her voice, tried to insist on her version of events, but the tension was suffocating. I stayed silent, letting the weight of suspicion press down on her from every angle. After dinner, she turned on me in private, her voice low and vicious. She accused me of betraying her by not defending her, of standing back and letting everyone believe the worst. That was when I told her plainly. The worst hadn't even been revealed yet. Her face drained of color. She demanded to know what I meant, but I didn't answer. I let the silence hang. The same silence I had let hang when I first picked up her phone and heard that whisper. Silence is a weapon, and in that moment, it cut sharper than any words. The dominoes had begun to fall, and there was no stopping them now. Stefan had lost his marriage. Camille had lost her reputation. But the true collapse, the exposure of every secret she had hidden, every man she had juggled, was still waiting. And when it came, it would not be in whispers or private confrontations. It would be in public, undeniable, and final. The days that followed felt like the calm before a storm that everyone could sense, but no one could predict. Camille still lived in the apartment, though we moved around each other like hostile ghosts. The air was thick with unspoken battles. She tried to resume normal routines, cooking, smiling weakly, touching my arm as if affection could undo what had already been scorched. But her eyes betrayed her. They darted to her phone constantly, watching for new messages, dreading each buzz. Stefan had gone silent, consumed by the collapse of his marriage and career. Camille's attempts to reach him were met with cold silence. Her frustration grew, because the man she had gambled so much on had abandoned her at the first sign of fire. She cursed him in private, then cried that he had been her escape. Escape from what? She never said. But I knew. She had never been satisfied with one life, one story, one version of herself. She needed multiple stages, different audiences, new thrills. Stefan was one. The unnamed man from her past was another, and I had been the anchor she had assumed would never move. The turning point came with an invitation. Camille's parents were hosting a small family gathering. A chance, she said, for us to show unity and clear the air. She begged me to attend, framing it as a chance to prove we were stronger than gossip. I agreed, but not for her reasons. I had been waiting for the right stage, the right audience. That dinner was it. The night of the gathering, we walked into her parents' house together, the picture of a couple still intact. Her relatives greeted us with cautious politeness. Conversations were stiff, eyes lingering longer than usual, whispers filling the gaps. Camille smiled too widely, laughed too quickly, and clung to my arm with a grip that felt like a plea. Dinner was served, and the performance began. Camille raised her voice to dominate conversations, steering topics toward trivialities, trying to project normalcy. Then, carefully, she shifted into her script. She spoke about misunderstandings, about jealousy, about how rumors spread faster than truth. She painted Stefan as a manipulator, me as a hothead, herself as the innocent caught between. For a while, the room listened, though the tension was palpable. Some nodded politely. Others kept their eyes fixed on their plates. Camille grew bolder, sensing she might be winning ground. Her voice softened, tears glistened on cue, her words dripping with practiced vulnerability. That was when I decided it was time. I set my fork down, pulled her phone from my pocket, and placed it on the table. The room quieted instantly. Camille's face blanched. She whispered my name like a warning, but I ignored her. Without theatrics, I opened the call log. I scrolled to Stefan's repeated calls, the timestamps aligning with nights she had claimed to be working late. I turned the screen toward her family. Murmurs rippled through the room. Camille tried to interject, insisting it was all fabricated, but her words cracked under the weight of evidence. Then I went further. I opened the messages from the second man, the one she thought I hadn't discovered. Weeks of plans, of meetings, of affectionate exchanges. Screenshots I had quietly saved to my own device. I didn't read them aloud. I let the words on the screen speak for themselves. Her father's face tightened. Her mother's hands shook as she covered her mouth. Cousins stared in disbelief, some exchanging looks of grim recognition, as if pieces of the puzzle finally made sense. Camille's script crumbled. Her wide-eyed performance turned into frantic denial, claiming the messages were old, harmless, misunderstood. But the weight of silence in the room told her no one believed her. The final blow came from outside the family. Stefan's wife had sent me a voice recording days earlier, a voicemail Stefan had left in the chaos of their unraveling. I had held on to it, waiting. Now I pressed play. The room filled with Stefan's voice, strained, desperate, confessing to things he hadn't intended anyone but her to hear. He mentioned the affair, the nights, the excuses. He mentioned Camille by name. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Camille's shoulders slumped. Her performance was over. Her mother burst into tears. Her father rose abruptly from the table, pacing the room with fury he couldn't contain. Relatives whispered harshly, some shaking their heads, others openly accusing her of dragging shame into the family. Camille tried to protest, reaching for me, but I pulled my arm away. The gathering dissolved into chaos. Plates clattered, voices rose. The family fractured under the weight of betrayal made public. Camille fled the table, locking herself in a room, screaming muffled denials through the door. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The truth had already detonated. In the days that followed, the consequences landed hard. Stefan's suspension turned into termination as HR confirmed the affair. His wife filed for divorce, securing custody of their children and cutting him out of the life he had tried to preserve. His reputation in the industry was ruined. Camille's downfall was even sharper. Her family withdrew support, humiliated by the public exposure. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Colleagues treated her like a cautionary tale. The second man, when confronted by his own partner, severed ties immediately. Camille was left isolated, scrambling to rewrite the story in a way that made her the victim, but no one was listening anymore. She confronted me in the apartment, eyes hollow, accusing me of orchestrating her destruction. She claimed I had ruined not just her relationship but her future, that I had been crueler than she deserved. I let her rant, let her scream, because the irony was too sharp to ignore. She hadn't lost her life because of me. She had lost it because of the choices she made long before I picked up that phone. When she finally left, dragging her bags down the stairs with trembling arms, she didn't slam the door. She closed it softly, almost reverently, like a curtain falling on the last act of a play. I stood in the empty apartment, listening to the quiet. For the first time in weeks, the silence wasn't oppressive. It was clean. The consequences had been brutal, but they were consequences that could not be erased. Stefan had lost his marriage and career. Camille had lost her family, friends, and reputation. And I hadn't lost anything worth keeping. What remained was clarity.